Hello and welcome. Now, the military takeover in Gabon on Wednesday, August the 30th, is the latest in a string of coups that have taken place in recent years across Africa. The coup is coming barely a month after the July 26 coup in Niger, which is creating a lot of political tension on the continent. Soldiers in Gabon ousted President Ali Bongo Ondimba, whose family has ruled the oil-rich country in Central Africa for more than 5 decades. Bongo's family has been accused of endemic corruption and not letting the country's oil wealth trickle down to the population. The ousted President Ali Bongo, who came to power after the death of his father in 2009, won a third term in an election which the opposition argued was heavily flawed. So far, the head of Gabon's elite Republican Guard, now General Brice Oligui Nguema, leader of the country's elite Republican Guard, now I have said that, which is also the unit in charge of the president's security, has been named as the country's transition leader. In an announcement on state TV Thursday, a spokesperson for the junta said Oligui would be sworn into office now on September the 4th before the Constitutional Court. In response, the African Union's Peace and Security Council suspended Gabon following the overthrow of the democratically elected government. Now, Gabon's coup is the 8th military takeover in Central and West Africa in just 3 years. It's quite disturbing. Now being joined on the program by political affairs analyst Nelson Ekujimi, and of course also joining us on the program is Ayodele Adewale, who is a political affairs analyst and a former local government chairman in Lagos State. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank you for having us.
Let me start with you, Ayo. What do you make of this latest coup? Quite worrying. And the reason why we're discussing this actually is that, look, you know, just as somebody described it, it is becoming a contagion, if you like, coups.
Well, it's very sad and it's mind-boggling that Africa in this time can be witnessing such a thing. These were things that everybody thought would never happen again, but it's rather unfortunate. And it's a wake-up call for the AU and everybody that loves democracy all over the world to stand up against it. Even if a government is not doing well in their country, it is not for the military to now intervene by taking power and all of that. The people of such country also should stand up to fight for their rights, like it was done in Turkey when they almost had a military takeover.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Their parliament was attacked. The Turkish people stood up and faced them and drove them away because they have no place in history to come and do that. And the people have risen throughout history, especially when they chased away monarchical rule in Europe, wanting a people's government. And the people's government is always the best because you have everybody involved. And when everybody involved, it means that things will definitely go well as long as the rules of the game of democracy is upheld. And again, caution to African leaders across that don't at your own will change the goalpost. Whatever you want to do, within 2 cycles of governance, you should be able to achieve it. And rather than stay there, build institutions. Build institutions, build followers, build an ideology that people will not depart from. And that is why I love some countries in Europe that have built a very good democratic system. Like when you go to Denmark, you go to Switzerland, you go to Australia, these people have been able to show very well that being in government is not that economically attractive to them. I mean, the gains in government, it's far appalling.
Yes.
Compared to the gains you attain or you achieve in private business. The day we are able to make politics not economically gainful to people, the better for the democratic system.
Nelson, you were here some time ago and we discussed the coup in Niger. And that would be like less than a month ago. And now we have this in Gabon. And you look at the pattern, you would say it's basically a copycat, if you like. I mean, the pattern is just the same as what we saw in Niger. Literally, what these soldiers did, the head of the presidential guard, this time again, simply locked up the president in his residence. Now locked up the president in his residence, and then came out to proclaim himself, leader, and that the president was no longer a president of the country. And then you look at this picture too, quite funny. You see the man. That's the man who is the current leader of the country now. He will be sworn in on Monday, as we've been told. Look at the way he was lifted, as if he just won a trophy, like he won a football match, and then celebrating.
Well, it's a sad development that, we are at this juncture again as Africans, because notwithstanding or no matter the reasons that must have been adduced by the coupists, it doesn't stand logic and rationality. You talk about corruption. If there's any institution that becomes more corrupt than ever, it is the military when they go into governance. When you talk about maladministration, once the military steps into governance, the military does otherwise. It goes, AYI with regards to misgovernance, and maladministration. You look at the history of civil wars in Africa, for example. You look at the Nigerian Civil War in 1967 to 70. It was because of military intervention in our political life. You look at the war going on presently in Sudan, between two military generals. You look at the war in Liberia. It was because of the intervention of the military. So I wonder why we continue to celebrate violations of our constitution, because what this amounts to, is an usurpation of the will of the people. The people have voted in somebody into, whether the process is flawed or not. We know that there's no system in the world that is perfect. And I'm very sure, as I speak to you, that the electoral system in Gabon has a window for judicial redress. So it is not enough for people to come up and say, oh, elections was flawed, there was corruption, and there's no provisions in the Gabonese, constitution that gives the military the powers to intervene as a messiah, if in their own wisdom. Because what it means is that, we are saying somebody in the military who is clothed, fed, trained, armed with the resources of the state can take up arms against the state. No society, must tolerate that. And that is why, for us as a people, we must all stand up and condemn this action by the coupists. And look at, his conduct. The guy who came into, that headship of the junta, even though they say it's going to be sworn in. The whole world must come together, denounce it, and reject it in its totality. It's an aberration. When you talk about, the reasons, some people have said the government in Gabon was monarchical in a way. I want to ask, the coupists that took over in Niger Republic, was President Bazoum, did he inherit the presidency of Niger from his father? Absolutely not. This was a government that came into office just about 2 years ago. So for me, it's a development that, must never be encouraged in any form. No matter how, we must all recognize that democracy, like I always say, is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end. Democracy is the only window through which, people's will, we can, get to the destination of good governance, not by somebody taking up arms, and overthrowing a legitimately elected government. If you have issues with elections, the windows of seeking redress are there. And that is why, as we speak, one of the suggestions one would like to make is that the African Union must...
We're going to come to that. Okay. Just let me pause you there. Ayo, let's even look at the man who has taken over government forcefully now in Gabon. He's been in the system for a very long time. He's a cousin to the ousted president. He served the president's father, Omar Bongo, and then continued with the son. At some point, he was ADC to the commander of the Presidential Guard, and then President Bongo, that's Bongo Jr. now, eventually make him commander of the Presidential Guard. There are several allegations of corruptions against him. In fact, there was this celebrated case where he was accused of buying a property in the United States of America and paying cash $1 million. And the question then was, as a military officer, not even the rank of general at the time, how was he able to get the money? So you have several allegations against him. He's well known in the country, and not for very good reasons. And now he's taking over. And the question you ask is, what exactly will change?
Nothing will change. The only thing that will change is his capacity to amass wealth for himself, and of course create problems more in that country. But like I said, the people must just stand up. The people must be encouraged to stand up and confront them.
But the point is, now you have a situation where you can see at least quite a number of the people are supporting the coup. I mean, we saw in the immediate aftermath of the coup, people took to the streets, celebrating, rejoicing.
Well, there have been a gap created ab initio. The family of the Bongos have been there for a long time. Apparently, people already are tired of that situation, and they capitalized on that in order to throw themselves into the ring, as the case is. So, you're going to have some people celebrating that, oh, the Bongos are out, forgetting that an extract of the Bongo is the one that have just come in, and all of that. So it will take realists to really dissect what is happening, and of course, tend to show it to the people that that is not your Messiah. Your Messiah can only come from the ballot box. That is not diluted, right? The ballot box where your vote will count. That is where your Messiah will come from. So everybody must condemn what has happened, and thank God for social media. People must continue to extray what is happening there and put the content into the Gabonese society to encourage the people, to let them see perfectly what has happened and the danger that's in front of them. Then African leaders also must quickly come in. World leaders must come in to put a stop to this. It has not become an avalanche.
The point is, how do you stop this? And that's the next question. How? What should the African Union, what should even the regional bodies, you have ECOWAS, you have the Central Africa body that is similar to ECOWAS. What should they do? What can they do to stop this?
Now, there are some...
And even stop it now, because look, just within the space of 3 years, you've had 8 coups, and this might just not be the last.
Now, to stop the trend, I'm not talking about the Gabonese issue.
No.
To stop that trend, African leaders need to speak truth to power and speak truth to themselves. That one, elongation of stay in office should not be encouraged. Any member that elongates himself or tweak the constitution to elongate his administration will be ostracized. You understand? And the country...
But we know that is also... Because it's easy now to say, look, it's elongation of power. Yes, in the case of Gabon, you could say maybe that's part of the reasons. But how do you explain the case of Niger, for instance, where the president was elected in 2021 and was doing well, but then the military struck?
Well, those are one of the solutions I just mentioned. The others will be good governance. There'll be good governance, even if you have come from any tribe, even if you are in a minority in that geopolitical equation. If you have good policies that can attract all and sundry to support you, definitely you must key into it so that you don't give room for any excuse. Thirdly, external intervention. Many of these things that you see also have the hand of Esau playing there. I would not want to mention countries, neither will I want to mention continents, but I know very well there's some global play going on, and they've seen this angle as a place for them to annex their dominance in order to cut out the survival of some countries placed in some continents. There's a global war, there's a global play going on. You understand? It's more like a chess game. Take this out, you cut out their supplies, then we can take dominance. And we must not give ourselves to such interplay as Africans, we must focus on what concerns us as a people and how to develop the continent. And of course, our space, which is the country. So by the time we start looking at these things pragmatically, let's look at the root cause of this matter. Maladministration is part of it. Elongation of tenure is part of it. External play is part of it. So you need very good African leaders to sit down, to watch this thing and voice out and try to work in harmony in order to stop this thing.
Nelson, let's tell ourselves the truth. Talking alone obviously would not solve this problem. I mean, we can see that. It happened in Mali. It was talk, no action, nothing happened. And then the coup leaders in Burkina Faso took that as an opportunity. They had their own. We had it in Guinea. Talk, no action. Then Niger. And still talk, no action. Now we have it in Gabon. We don't know where next. The ECOWAS was talking about setting up a standby force, and for a very good reason to prevent coups of this nature from happening. Do you think this latest coup, clearly points to the fact that Africa needs that kind of force? Because obviously some of this military, some of these militaries may just not understand the language of dialogue, but maybe force can make a difference.
Well, I think I want to start from a question you asked the other guest, and it is about some people celebrating. Well, that is normal in any political climb, that even if the devil comes up tomorrow, and takes over government in a country, that you see some people celebrating.
And let's not forget, there's opposition.
Yes. So that does not confer legitimacy on an illegitimate government, because the constitution of Gabon is very clear that the only way to ascend power legitimately is through the ballot box. So no matter the reasons anybody must have given, or because people are supporting an illegal government, that does not make it legitimate. We must recognize that the country Gabon has a constitution in place, and that constitution must be obeyed. Talking about what should be done, we must also recognize that these international or African or sub-regional institutions have their mechanisms, they have their processes, and I'm sure that the use of force will be the last resort. We have seen it at play in, even in countries like Gambia.
I'm even talking about preventing it from happening, because when it happens, it's always very difficult.
Yes, one of the ways to prevent it, like, I wanted to say earlier on, was for us to, for these African institutions, to take a democratic study of democratic institutions in the member countries. And when they have done that, we can also take a cue from the ECOWAS, resolution that any member country of ECOWAS cannot tweak, the Electoral Act or the Constitution 6 months to an election. You talked about, good governance. Who determines good governance? It is the people, and not the military coming into. So I don't know how anybody can say, oh, one of the reasons why they took over is because, of bad governance. The military is not in any way, in a position to tell the electorate or the people of a country what good governance should be. And good governance, will be determined by the people, such that at the end of either 4 years or 5 years, or whatever be the tenure limit, the people have a choice, of voting out whoever they feel has not met their expectations. That is the way to go. And what I want to advocate again is that, like I started earlier on, is that if we take a democratic, inventory of member countries, we can now come together through the democratic institutions in the AU, for example, in the sub-regional bodies, ECOWAS, SADC, and maybe the central, East African region. You can say, okay, within the life of an administration, you are not, as a government, if you want us to confer legitimacy on your democratic system, you cannot tweak your constitution while still in power. That could be a way to go, but I won't want to sit down here and want to impose or suggest my will on the generality of the African continent without taking inventory of their thoughts, their aspirations and wishes. And that is why I've advocated that, this country, AU as a body, should take an inventory, because we have seen countries in Asia where they have run monarchical system, and nobody is in the military there is not overthrowing. A country like Saudi Arabia, for example, they run a monarchical, system of government, whether democracy or otherwise.
The
military is not overthrowing.
But in their case, it's monarchy. In the case of Africa, it's not monarchy; it's democratic system. But let me just quickly ask you this. I mean, you talked about the constitution and that the need to respect the constitution. But what about a situation where some of these leaders to use the constitution to perpetuate themselves in power, and carrying out democratic change becomes almost impossible through constitutional means? What happens?
What happens is that as a body, as AU, we have the responsibility now to look at how to develop institutions within the democratic process in member countries. Because if a president, knowing fully well that he cannot, get back into power without, tweaking with the constitution, then it behoves on us to build institutions that will be able to resist. I'll give you a vivid example. In Nigeria in 2015, when the Independent National Electoral Commission came up with the e-card reader, the government of the day, the government of former President Goodluck Jonathan, wanted to resist it because why? In the past, this is a country where, Nigeria was a country where on election day, 500 names will be on the voters register, and the 500 names at the conclusion of polls will be counted as having voted for only one party. But with the introduction of e-card reader and the PVC, we saw the voters turnout in our elections drop from about 56% to about 35-29%, because now the system through civil engagement, because as civil society practitioners, we were also on the field. We added our voice, and Nigerians came out and said, no,
I get your point.
This is the way to go. We won't allow the government of the day to continue to manipulate us.
Yes, unfortunately, we haven't got time. But let me ask you a final question here, Ayo. What kind of response do you expect to see from the African Union that could send a very strong message, and a strong message to any military at all that might be thinking of their own coup not to do it? Because there has to be a strong response to this.
Well, the response should start from speaking to themselves and speaking the truth to themselves on how to safeguard democracy in their various nations. One is for them to key to the provision of their constitution and to making it sure that it is people-centered and people-participatory. Secondly is that those coupists, the sanction that will be meted out to them should not be such that will affect the whole nation. It should be targeted sanctions. Anybody or any member or persons that is involved in it, they have properties all over the world. They have wealth all over the world. They can work with the UN and work with many of these countries to frozen their properties and their accounts. And also their family members that are out there should be repatriated back to their
Funny enough, some of them are quite local. I understand the General Tiani of Niger had not traveled out of that country for about 12 years.
But they have 2Gs. They have 2Gs that are taking their properties and money is out. The world order knows how to track them.
Okay.
They know where their money is, just like they did with their Abacha loot. Right? I think, go after those monies and you see them, coming back to the table and negotiating their way out, and they leave that power.
I think military option should, also not be rolled out. They should be given, there should be dialogue should continue, but if they refuse to obey the constitution of the country as well as the international treaty of which their country is signatory to, then the military option should be adopted. We can't continue to allow people violate the constitutions of African countries.
All right, gentlemen.
And let them go away with it. It's unacceptable.
I think that's just where we have to draw the curtain. But this is a serious issue of concern, because you never can tell where the next coup will happen. I mean, all the coups we've seen so far have happened in, francophone countries, so to speak. But you never can tell. It might come to anglophone countries.
Yeah.
And who says Nigeria is immune? It's not something we want, but everything has to be done to stop this. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on the program. and sharing your thoughts with us. Nelson Ekojimi, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
And Ayodele Adewale, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Well, still to come on the program, the big face-off between the executive and the legislature in Lagos State. What exactly is going on? That's what we'll be talking about next. Opinions are free, facts are sacred, but truth is universal. How, in practical terms, can we, for instance, de-escalate the tension?
President must see himself as the president of the Federal Republic.
We know where the enemy is. 3 places. The Lake Chad Basin, the border area between Nigeria and Cameroon, and then the Sambisa Forest.
On DEJI360, we give you a complete dose of everything. Opinion, facts, and undiluted truth.
I hardly believe what politicians say in this part of the world.
A new Nigeria is possible, a future is possible.
We delve into the issues, dissect it so that you can understand it, and use it to take action.
I don't think there's any need for any governor to look for grant for ranching.
DEJI360, dissecting the issues.